Welcome to Photoshop. We're going to try and figure our way through this. It'll be interesting. What I want you to do to start is you're going to go to Open, and then you will end up opening the Photoshop picture, in-class exercise Photoshop picture that you can find in the Wheat6 file on Brightspace. So I've tried to shrink my display down so we can see most of the features, but the first thing we're really going to do is going to go through and take off things we might not need right now. This should be a fairly standard setup when you begin. As I go up to color, swatches, gradients, and patterns, I'm not going to need those necessarily right now when I'm beginning. So you can keep them, you can throw them. I'm certainly going to get rid of color for now. And when I do that, I'm going to go over to these series of lines, and it will do a drop down menu, which you can barely see because it's not in our thing, and you're going to hit close or close tab group. Likewise for swatches, I'm going to hit the 3 lines or 4 lines, and one of my drop down menu items will be close. Okay. And this is because I want the important things that I'm going to need a lot of, which for me will be moving history. So you'll see history is this little arrow with the 3 dots, but I want to pull it over here so I have it readily accessible. It's how I undo my mistakes, which I will make lots of. Moving down to properties, adjustments, and libraries. I'm not that interested in that stuff, so I'm going to do the same thing. Close when you see it. Closing adjustments for now. And there we go. I hit close tab and it gave my whole thing down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on layers, and this should give me some more room. And in fact, I might even drag this a little further up so I can see all the layers I make as I go through. And Photoshop is all about making layers. Right now, when you opened your Photoshop picture, you got a picture of my dog looking out a window, which I terribly made in Photoshop. So what we want to do today is just play and figure out how to get around it. As I add things to this picture, I'm basically going to recreate this picture with some color and some stuff going on in it. I'm mindful of working my layers back to front. Now, we can always move our layers around if we don't like what happened, and we can certainly hide things so we can see what we need to work on, but think back to front. So let's say we're in a room with my dog and we want to add some wallpaper. I'm going to go up to the rectangular marquee tool, and you can see there's a shortcut button, which is just M on your keyboard. But for now, we'll do it the long way, and I'm going to select basically the entire picture. And when I have it selected, you see the dancing ants wandering around it. So I want to make a layer. So I go down to the half circle on its side, and I have a lot of choices. Let's maybe try and do a gradient. I don't want to commit to a pattern. I click on gradient, and it gives me this kind of standard gradient fill. It's really fun. You can play with this. If you go to style, it's going to be, radial into out. You can reverse that, so it goes out to in. If you like that look better, that's pretty cool. If that's too dark, you can change it. You can do all sorts of changes. Just click around, find me something cool. I'm going to try and find a color I like. Oh, here's some pinks. Ooh, wow. Let's see what happens when I change that. Now, my dog disappeared. No worries. I'll get her back. Okay, I'm going for this kind of cheesy blush. I'm going to hit OK. I've lost my dog. To get her back, I'm just going to hide the pink layer I just made. Looking at my picture, I can see there's a background behind the tree, and then the tree, and the window in front, and then ultimately a dog in front of that. So what I might want to do next is add the background behind the tree. So I'm just going to select, I know I can always layer over things. Right about here. And I'm going to do the same kind of thing, add a layer of choice. Let's see what else we can do. Maybe we're going to do a pattern. Okay, I can add some leaves. I've got grass. water. So open the folder by clicking on the down arrow, see what they've got. I'm going to close that. Kind of loving, oh my, the water with the sand. Like I said, you might have something different. We'll do clear water background. And as we look at it, is there anything I need to change? I like the scale angle. You can always mess around to see what it does. I click OK. All right, now my dog's head is cut off. But if I put my pink layer back on, I see that the water is in front of the pink layer. So let's hide those both and continue coloring. I feel like next I want to deal with this tree. A little trickier. Hard to see from here. So knowing your shortcut keys is huge in Photoshop. So if you want to zoom in on Mac, Command plus, on Windows, Control plus. And we just click and we get closer and closer and closer. And if you're using a mouse, you can pan around by holding down the space bar, which will give you a hand, and then you can drag around. I'm using a touchpad, so I'm actually just going to go old school and scroll up till I get what I want of that tree in there. There's lots of pieces of tree, but here's one that I can see a few chunks of for now to start. Maybe I'll back up a bit. There we go. I can get 2 panes worth of tree. This is not a regular object that I want to select. However, Photoshop is pretty smart about finding things with nice, well-defined lines. So I'm going to come off of my rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to move down past the lasso, which can be handy as well when you need to trace crazy stuff, and down to the object selection tool. I click on that to activate it, or I could have just pressed W, and I'm going to go over. Ooh, I don't have to wait for that to finish. I did another click. And we'll see what I can get it to grab when I start. And dragging, holding down that left mouse button, then releasing and giving it a fair amount of time to find it. Looking closely at the tree outlines, I'm pretty happy with what's happened here. I want to add the bottom part of the tree, so I'm going to scroll down so I can see it a little better. But I want to add it to the same layer. I want it to be part of the current selection. So instead of just restarting and clicking and dragging, which will deselect my tree that I have, before I click, I'm going to hit Shift and hold it down. And you'll notice what that's done. I'll toggle off. There's a tiny, tiny plus that's appeared. So it's saying, I'm going to add another selection to your existing one. Then left click and hold, dragging. A little afraid of the tail, so maybe I'll stop here and see what happens. So it looks pretty good, but maybe it's gotten a little too much of the tail, which, you know, that's a pretty good tail. I don't want that little nub to be part of the selection. Ah, what happened there? I clicked. So when you panic and you absolutely accidentally deselect something, back to history, you'll see the last thing it thinks I did was a deselect. I'm just going to reselect object selection. Okay, I don't want the tail. I'm going to zoom in. And I can see how it's just added a bit there. So the best tool I probably have to deal with this is not necessarily one that's going to box in that piece of tail. I'm going to go back over to where I was on the object selection tool, and there's a little drop down menu that's hard to get, but if you right click or do your Apple equivalent, you can get a menu. So I'm going to actually choose the quick selection tool. I'm going to use it to deselect instead of select. So I grab that and notice everything's still selected. This brush is too big. You can either drop down the size up here, or if you see the square brackets on your keyboard, you can hit the leftmost one and notice that that little plus gets down. The plus tells me it's going to add a selection stuff. I don't want to do that. So I override adding by hitting Alt on Windows or Option on Mac, and you'll see that the plus turns into a minus. And I'm just going to click and scrub so it doesn't have that piece of tail anymore. Perfect. Over to my layer creation. I've got a lot of stuff going on. So maybe I'm just going to go with a solid color here. Now, if I wanted something in the greens, I could just get that area and it will preview and you can see the neon green in the background. You know, with that blue, that's going to be pretty painful. So maybe I will, no, I've already got blue. Maybe I will go with the purple tree and see how I like it. I click OK. I'm going to zoom back out by hitting Control minus as many times as necessary. I see my tree. Pretty happy. I'm going to put on my extra layer, see how it looks. Remembering that window frame is cutting out the tree, that's fine. So far, so good. I'd like to work on the window frame now. Maybe I'll leave my tree there so I can make sure I don't miss it and leave any blanks around it. So I'm going to zoom in a bit, but I want to keep the whole frame in my picture. And we can use the rectangular marquee tool in a rather clever way. So we go back to the marquee tool and we come over to where we can select. So I'm going to start from this very bottom corner. And I've got a selection. But I want to cut some stuff out. So here's a really clever thing you can do. You can make the window frames. If you go up to a corner of a frame, hit the Alt or Option button, and that will say, I'm removing this from your selection or your layer. And then you can just trace them. There's so many ways to go about this. I like this one, it makes me feel like I'm being clever. I'm still holding down that Alt so you see that minus sign, and I'm just going through and grabbing each one. And with those marching ants, we are only picking up the medium gray frame. There we go. Not perfect. There's a lot of ways to make it perfect. You could do a guideline, but for intro, we'll stay with this. Here's my selection. Let's make it something. We'll go solid color again. I remember that my walls kind of had a pink going on. So maybe I'll do these darker purple, you know, because that's going to look hot. Here we go. All right, let's add some layers on, see how things are going. Okay. Okay, getting there. Now I notice on the edge that I see some of the blue hasn't been covered by the purple. If I zoom in. What can I do to fix that? I can change my purple layer a bit. Maybe I'll just do a free transform. So what I'll do here is I make sure I have it selected in my layer, so where my little hand is there, and then I'm going to go up to edit. And I'll see if there's something I want to do. No, I think I will just try free transform. And I can just drag out my corner a bit. I want to make sure it doesn't mess everything else up. And it seems okay. Other options, I could have chosen the blue or the water layer and shrunk it down a bit. That would have worked as well. And you feel like you're stuck in that, you want to get out of having it selected. Sometimes it's easy to do the right click, deselect, or go up to select and deselect. I often just end up clicking onto another layer and that will pull the deselect in. Control minus to back it up. Let's hide some layers to see where we are. No, we're going to hide all those. It's really the pink one I have to hide. Maybe I'll put back my frame. Okay, so I've been my frame's a little off. That's totally fine. I'm going to make another one. I'm going to use the same trick, rectangular marquee. There's lots of them that you can do one that traces around sharp edges or circles, but I'm just going to use this and I'm going to change it a bit because why not? So once again, I have the area that I want. Then I have the area that I want to cut out. I hit Alt or Option. I'm going to catch the corner but keep some overlap. There we go. And I'm going to pick a color for this. If I wanted a color I already had, I could sample it. See how I've changed to an eyedropper? But I'm going to just wing it. I feel like my colors always turn out awesomely. There we go. Okay. What's next? The dog. Let's hide a few layers. And let's select our dog. Maybe we'll use a different selection tool this time. So I'm going to zoom in on Nico here. Got her all in there. Maybe I'll try using that quick select tool that I used to scratch off some of the tail with the tree, but I'll go the other way. So it is a quick selection tool when you have the ice cream cone, I guess, or the circle round. If it's not the right one, remember, right click and it gives you object selection, magic wand. We'll stick with quick selection. Magic wand can be good too, but that's good. And look how quickly it picks it up. Well, that's great. So that shows something that we can fix there. I think my legs went too crazy at the bottom. And while you have this tool on, it's just adding for you. Now, what happened? I've got the entire tree. Perfect. Perfect because I want to undo it. So I need to deselect, so I'm going to just hit and hold Alt. We can't see it, it's really small. I can make this bigger because it's way, way small. So I'm going to hit the square brackets to the right of the keyboard to increase the size. Now I see the plus. I hit and hold Alt, it turns to a minus, and now I'm erasing. Click and hold. I'll go back and double check that I didn't get that all. That looks pretty good. And I wanted to go check what was going on with the dog legs down here because I felt like we had all the white area as well. So I'm just going to make sure we don't. Yeah, we did. And then I'm going to undo the white area in between these two legs. Looking pretty hot. I got a dog. I'll scroll up to make sure I don't have any tree bases. Nope, just my dog. I'll add a couple for color for this dog as well, and maybe after all the stuff I have going on, I should be a little more careful with what we got. Maybe she'll be just kind of a nice little gray. Or maybe, yeah, I think gray is safest. All right, let's bring it all back together. I'm going to put in my layers, make them visible. Perfect. What happened? I was messing around and I ended up getting a layer out of order. This is no big deal. I'm going to click on Color Fill 4, which I can see from the black and white mask photo is the dog, and I'm going to drag her up so she's the top layer. And you'll notice she moves in front of the window frame. Add some more window frame. Let's Control minus so we can see everything in its glory. Add some more layers. Visibility. There we go. Woof, even better. Hard to see the dog, but hoping when I put on the wallpaper, it'll look good. And there we go. A seriously questionable coloring job on this picture. If you ever want to change a color, you can just double click and change it right there. So I'm not feeling it with the dog being that light. So I'm going to switch her over to quite dark. If I wanted to make her smoother, there's so many things you can do with this. We'll leave it for now, but feel free to play around and have fun with that. The last thing I'd like to do is to add some text. So I'm going to go over to the big T here, which is the text button. I'm going to choose horizontal text. And I click where I want it to appear. And in this case, I can see this little tiny thing has appeared, and it's actually got some text in it. It's a placeholder that Photoshop uses, so I can barely see it. So I can change the font by using the drop-down menu, or I can actually click over the T and drag to make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. There we go. And I'm going to actually continue to do that. There we go. If I want to move it, I go below until I get the drag around. And I'll put it here. if I would like to change the font style. You have many, many, many selection options. I'll go in the drop down menu, and if you could get your photo to be a little more not behind it, let me see if I can do that by clicking out. Oops, I made another one. You can change the text. So just trying to move my thing over so I can see a little bit more as I go down. All right, there you go. So you can pick whatever you want. There's just oodles. You can filter it so that you get serif or whatever you want. It never ends. It never ends. I find this very overwhelming. We'll just go with the, oh, I don't even know where I think. I can't decide. Oh, I don't like that. Okay. You see the problem. Is that Ravy? I like a good Ravy. There we go. I'm going to come back in. I see that it's way too big again now, so I'm going to move it over. Also, this is not what I wanted to say. I've kind of centered it, so I'm going to click in, back it up, and I'm just going to type my dog's name, which is Nico. Excellent. Moving it over again to where I want it. There's a lot of fun things you can do with text. I've made it massive. You can select it and do all sorts of alterations with it. Super, super fun times.